So my name is Chad. Professional videographer. I work for the health authority, one of the health authorities here in BC. Previous to that, I was a cameraman, reporter, anchor at a local TV station in Kamloops, British Columbia. So it's a little bit about me. Yeah, I mean, it's fairly simple in the sense that I've had this since I was born, essentially. Genetic mutation. I have what they call paradoxal phosphate dependent epilepsy. Another word that I've been told, for people out there that might know a little bit about this, it's the PNPO type of epilepsy. And so essentially I was chatting just a little bit with my mom a couple nights ago, just in terms of just getting her perspective on sort of the timeline that happened. Because I had initially thought that the seizure started pretty much hours after I was born, but it actually didn't present itself apparently until about day 6. And so I started seizures on day 6 and was taken back to the hospital, and they were trying to figure out what was going on at the time. And this was back I was born in 1987. So this was back in the 80s when really wasn't much research at that point and not much known about it. I think at that time I was like one of 100 cases in the entire world. And so the pediatricians were trying to figure out what was going on with me. And my mom was mentioning that on day 6, I don't know where it came from. Probably, I think the pediatrician that did it, just based on his limited knowledge, injected me with vitamin B6. And that seemed to stop the seizures at that point. And then basically that injection lasted about, again, according to my mom, lasted about 6 weeks. And then after that 6 weeks, when the B6 wore off, the seizures then started again. And I was taken back to Children's Hospital in Vancouver. And again, I was put under tests like EEGs and CT scans. They were just trying to figure out exactly, because obviously I was having the seizures, but they still hadn't figured out exactly what was going on. And so again, I got another injection of B6, and that seemed to last until I was about 3 months. And then from 3 months on, I was basically on vitamin B6. I'm currently still on it, and I will be for the rest of my life, kind of thing. So in addition to some other medication that I'm on as well for the seizures. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about sort of how I was diagnosed and how we got here. And yeah, from what I know, my body, and it's not there's a difference between deficiency and dependency. So it's not like my body's actually deficient in B6, but it's dependent on it. And so without it, over the course of many, many days and weeks, if I went without it, I would probably eventually die, essentially. And so my body and my brain rely on it. And so that helps keep the seizures under control, but it also helps, and people that have epilepsy or experience with it out there will know this, but it also keeps the symptoms at bay as well. Because for me, I haven't had a seizure since I was in high school. Thankfully, I'm 38 years old now, so that's 20 years that I've gone without. That's not to say that I haven't had any struggles or symptoms or any of that kind of stuff. I struggle with the symptoms around my condition almost every day, in a way, in a variety of ways. Some days, actually most days, I'm fairly symptom free, but then there's other days whether I don't get enough sleep or maybe miss my medication or I'm not eating properly or whatever, or stress. I've got 3 kids, so there's a lot of that in the house. So yeah, if any of those combinations happen, then my symptoms get worse. But the vitamin B6 essentially, and I take some other anti-epileptic medication that essentially just keeps those symptoms. So yeah, like I was mentioning, day to day, for the most part, I'm able to live a pretty normal life. I'm a professional videographer. I used to be an anchor on TV. And so, Yeah, it's been amazing in that sense. Like I feel very blessed given my diagnosis that I've been able to do much a normal life. And day to day, I don't really like struggle too much. Like I mentioned, I have my moments where my symptoms are quite elevated, and I just have to take like breaks from work or breaks from whatever I'm doing, or if I'm taking care of the kids, like obviously like some of my kids are a bit older. Like I've got a 7-year old, 4-year old, and a 1-year old. But like if I'm taking care of the two older ones, for example, like and I'm not feeling great, I usually just put a show on for them or whatever and kind of just take a break if I need to. But for the most part, I'm able to do anything that any other dad would do in terms of taking him to the water park or to the park or around town to do activities. So that's good. I mean, when things kind of go sideways, it's not fun as people that are listening to this that have epilepsy out there. Like it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like there are even if I'm eating well, taking my medication, getting half decent sleep. There's every once in a while where things flare up, and like I'm fairly confident that like won't necessarily in those moments have like a seizure because it's been 2 decades and they're for the most part under control. But the symptoms that I do get, it's almost like curious to know from other people that experience this if they have the same thing. It's almost like I get a little bit of PTSD because the seizures when I was a kid were really bad and the symptoms were really bad. And so when I'm in these situations, it makes me fearful that something's going to happen because I can't necessarily be myself. And you just are worried about like something happening. And it kind of takes you, there's like flashbacks to like my childhood where you're in a situation and boom, you get, I used to get like an aura that would warn me, which I guess was better than the alternative of just passing out. But at the same time, that remembering having that aura and what it came with, I don't know, it's a little bit triggering for me when I get close to that, if that makes any sense. So when I do have those moments, it's not fun because it's one thing to have it at home if you're in that situation, because then I can talk to my wife about it and go lay down in bed or whatever. But if you're and not many people know about this either, so I almost have to mask it in a way. And so that fear is still there, and you worry about what might happen and potentially people judging you or whatever. And so you just have to sort of fight through it, fight through that discomfort. And that's kind of what I learned from an early age is fighting through that discomfort and as much as you can. Obviously, there's situations you've got to be realistic and tell somebody. But I was kind of able to learn from an early age just to, and that's what my mom sort of talked about is not letting this limit your potential and telling me to fight through some of this stuff. And so I did that from an early age and kind of do that today as well. Yeah, I don't know if I've necessarily faced like external judgment from people like saying something, but I know myself I probably internalized that a little bit just out of fear that somebody might judge you or look at you differently, right? And potentially like impacting how they see you and like potential opportunities that are out there that might not happen because you have this, and people might think you're like handicapped or something or you can't do certain things because of it. I've feared that. I haven't necessarily faced that, but yeah, that's always been on my mind in terms of and that's why I'm more comfortable now that I'm older, more mature. I'm just more comfortable in my own skin. Like I don't mind telling. I'm not out there like advertising it to the world, but I'm more comfortable telling friends or whatever what I'm facing. And if it comes up in conversation, I don't necessarily have a problem because I'm confident in my abilities. I've made it to this point in my life and my career, and I don't necessarily think anything will happen. But but yeah, it's definitely a thought, and I'm sure lots of people out there have faced the same fear. It's not necessarily a rational fear, but it's there. Yeah, like I said earlier in the interview, like without the medication, I don't know if I'd be where I am today. I mean, the vitamin B6 is obviously essential for my livelihood. Like without it, I wouldn't be here. But then there's other medication that was introduced. So basically, from the time I was 3 months, as I said, until probably early teenagehood, I was literally just on vitamin B6, and that's all I was on. But then once I hit teenagehood and puberty, all those chemical changes, that was actually a really hard time for me because of puberty and the chemical changes. My epilepsy is chemical based. Well, I guess all the epilepsy is chemical based, but yeah, it was hard because yeah, I had I think in one year, like grade 7 or grade 8, I think I had like 6 or 7 seizures in one year, which was very rare because I think previous, even though I struggled as a kid, I think I only had a couple a year. And so I had 3 or 4 times more. And so I was obviously taken to the doctor, my specialist at Children's Hospital, and they put me on a couple medications at first. Some of them, there was some side effects. I think one of them, I can't remember, caused like rashes or whatever. So I had to get off that. And then eventually I landed on gabapentin, which is an anti-epileptic. It's actually, as I found out later in life, lots of people take it for like pain, like nerve pain or whatever. But yeah, gabapentin, I was put on it when I was like 13, 14 years old, and that made a huge difference. And I'm on gabapentin to this day. And then another thing that might surprise people, I've had other periods in my life where I've had really, really hard times. So sort of on and off during my childhood, becoming a teenager was huge. And then things were good probably up until, so I'll tell you a story. So when I was about to get married, this was in 2014. It's obviously a stressful time in your life. And I'm not necessarily one, even though I was on TV at one point, I'm not necessarily one to have like all the attention on me. And so, and there was probably some other stuff going on as well, but certainly that's the stress of the wedding made it a lot worse. But I was in a really, really bad spot. Again, not seizuring, but the symptoms were very, very severe to the point where it was like days leading up to the wedding being like, how am I going to get through that kind of thing? It's supposed to be the happiest day of your life, right? And you're like, how am I going to get through this? And so during that time leading up, actually, this is just triggered a thought. So I was put on B6 from the time I was born, but it was actually discovered that B6, yes, B6 helps me, but it's actually, and I'm on it to this day, but it was told to me that my specific condition, it's not paradoxin dependent epilepsy, is B6. It's actually paradoxal phosphate dependent epilepsy, which is like a sort of a different form of B6. And so that actually needs to be like specially compounded and all that kind of stuff. And so right before the wedding, that's when my specialist actually said, yeah, you actually should be on this paradoxal phosphate. So I started with that, not to say it didn't really make a difference. It actually in some ways stressed me out a little bit more because like, oh gosh, like I was supposed to be on this my whole life, and is this why I'm not doing well or whatever? So it actually caused a little bit more stress. But nonetheless, so it was discovered that I should be on paradoxal phosphate, PLP, and so I'm actually on that to this day. But also, it was suggested that I probably for my anxiety at first, but it actually ended up helping my condition, is just like an antidepressant to like boost my mood, take away some anxiety, because like stress for me is like, especially if I'm stressing, interesting, if I'm stressing about my kids running around goofing off trying to get them to bed, if I'm stressing about just like simple day-to-day things, like it doesn't necessarily affect me. But if I'm stressing about my condition, like it makes it and so during that time, that's partly what happened with the wedding. But I've noticed that's, yeah, since going on the And like I was given a spinal tap and all that kind of stuff, and like my neurotransmitter levels were way down. And so since being on the paradoxal phosphate, the PLP, like my levels have elevated and things are good now. And then combined with like the B6, I still take B6. I took B6, like a bunch of B vitamins, gabapentin, PLP, and then the antidepressant. Like all that combined seems to be the right combination. Yeah, I mean, funding for any kind of condition or any kind of medical illness is important, because the more money and the more research that goes into it, the more we know. Like obviously there's a variety of, like in epilepsy specifically, I think my mom was saying that with mine, I think there's 46 variants within just that one specific. So I can only imagine like how many like different forms of epilepsy and seizures and all that kind of stuff that are out in the world. So like that's like, I'm sure for the researchers out there, that's very overwhelming, even just thinking about it myself. So given just the vastness of conditions out there, like the more we know about just anything, the better. So I don't really know too much about what the funding, how much funding you guys get and what funding goes into research, but I just know in general that that research is really important, because I mean, in my situation, like obviously, like I said, back in the 80s when there wasn't really much known about it, but the fact that like that one, like it's miraculous. The fact that obviously that one doctor came across, that one pediatrician that injected me with B6 at day 6, like he obviously had some knowledge, and there was obviously some sort of research knowledge transfer there, like on a very micro scale, that basically probably saved my life. And so I can only imagine now, 38, almost 40 years later, but like how much, I'm sure, like we've progressed quite a bit, I'm sure, in the world of epilepsy. But as you know, I'm sure we're just scratching the surface in terms of research and what can be done, and so yeah, more the merrier, right? I would just say that, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience. I know some people deal with like severe epilepsy, and so that's a little bit different. But I don't know. I would just say that for people out there, that I mean, both the public and patients, like that epilepsy doesn't define who you are. It doesn't mean you can't. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought up that question, because that's part of the reason why I kind of reached out to you guys in a way. When I saw this Faces of Epilepsy campaign, I thought it was a really cool campaign idea, because it like really humanizes people with epilepsy out there, and people get to know like the real person behind that, and hopefully destigmatizes that. But I also, the reason I reached out as well and wanted to do this is because I wanted to, even if like one person sees it out there, whether it's the public or a patient, even if one person hears my story out there and becomes hopeful for their life, that would be pretty cool. Because just building off what I was saying, yeah, there might be the perception that somebody with epilepsy maybe is limited in their abilities to do things, but that's not really the case. I mean, from the time, I didn't really go too much into my background, but from the time I was like 3 years old, I wanted to be, my dad was a professional athlete, played in the Canadian Football League. And so I grew up around sports, and I wanted to be a sportscaster from the time I was like 3 years old. And yeah, I basically lived out that dream. I was a sports reporter and sports anchor at a television station here in Kamloops, BC. And yeah, I had that in mind growing up, and I was able to live out that dream. So anybody listening out there that maybe has epilepsy, or any struggles for that matter, yeah, don't give up on your dreams. Like you can do whatever you want. You can do, anybody can put their mind to it, and even somebody with epilepsy, put your mind to it. You can do anything.